So, David Pakman actually went after Dave Rubin yesterday. Now, he actually talked about a Rubin Report interview that I wasn't even aware of. It's with some crazy person named Brigitte Gabriel. I really don't know much about her. I didn't know who she was until I saw this video. But she's really just totally off the rails. I think that she's under some weird delusion of grandeur where she thinks that she's saving Western civilization and she thinks that she's, bringing the media back and saving it. Really weird stuff. This is sort of Dave Rubin stuff where Dave Rubin has these weird delusions of grandeur where he thinks that he's making a change in political discourse and dialogue and he's really changing the system when he's not doing anything, nothing. Now, if you don't know, David Pakman and Dave Rubin have quite a bit of history together. They were friends for a long time. Doesn't look like that's the case anymore. Basically, Dave Rubin went on Pakman's show, and it turned out to be a massive fiasco for Dave Rubin because, unlike Dave Rubin's interview style, where he doesn't actually push or ask any serious questions of any sort, instead, David Pakman actually did the correct interview tactic, which is actually being challenged and having some legitimate points. Now, some of those include, there are multiple ones, but one of them was basically, he goes, well, how can you be for single-payer healthcare and also be a classical liberal? Because classical liberalism is based on uber laissez-faire economics, and single-payer healthcare is the complete opposite of that. So how do you manage to do that? And then he says that he supports single payer, but he describes Obamacare. So clearly this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know anything. And then David Pakman brings up, because Dave Rubin's like, I've got huge capital costs for this show, man. I don't know what I would do if there are higher taxes. And David Pakman goes, but hold on, there wouldn't higher tax rates be more incentive to invest in your own business to drive your profits, because those capital costs that you have, those are tax deductible. And he didn't know what he was talking about because he doesn't know anything. His response was, and he just has no clue what he's talking about. And most recently, David Pakman has been trying to get on the Rubin show for, I think, almost around 2 years now, 1.5 to 2 years. The last time around in the summer, it didn't end up working out for whatever reason that may be. Then this most recent time where Pakman was in Los Angeles for Politicon, it also for some reason didn't happen. God knows why. Only God knows why. My opinion on that is Dave Rubin doesn't want to have him on his show because he's going to get mauled and totally destroyed on everything that he says. So I think that Dave Rubin is legitimately just straight up dodging David Pakman. I don't think he wants to do a sit down with David Pakman, because just like he's running away from and cowering from Sam Cedar and Anna Kasparian, he's doing the same thing with David Pakman now. Trust me on that one. Now, David Pakman is going to talk about this totally crazy interview that was done where this person is going to do these weird George Soros conspiracy theories. It's insane. One of the conspiracies is that the New York Times and the Washington Post and all these mainstream media outlets are directly getting their talking points from George Soros directly. Let's take a second to think of how ridiculous that is. It's literally outright false. It's one of the most ridiculous things ever, and it's just downright crazy. It's insane. This person has delusions of grandeur where she thinks she's saving Western civilization, and B, she's literally insane and just dumb. So check out what David Pakman has to say about this.
Okay, there's a program called the Rubin Report where people of all political backgrounds are interviewed, mostly conservatives, actually. Dave Rubin, as a cultural critic and interviewer, is more like, say, Larry King, from what I've read, than some other interviewers, in that it's not so much about Dave debating people in playing point counterpoint or pushing back against the things that the guests say. It's more about hearing ideas from his guests. What do the guests think? What do the guests believe? What do the guests want to see happen in politics and culture and society? And today I have clips for you from an interview he did with a woman named Brigitte Gabriel, who is absolutely one of the most vile right-wing extremists that the conservative think tank industrial complex has ever produced. In a sort of less than Dave Rubin-like fashion, he actually interjected during this interview more of his own ideas and positions into the conversation. For example, suggesting that anti-George Soros conspiracy theories can't be anti-Semitic because, quote, everything he does is usually against Israel. But I'm sort of getting ahead of myself here. We're not there in this exploration just yet. What I want to focus in on here as we explore this interview with Brigitte Gabriel are the things Brigitte Gabriel is saying so outrageous that not calling them out must be denounced. When I last interviewed Dave Rubin, I gave him some examples where I, as an interviewer, would come prepared and say, hold on a second, that's not right. So one example I gave him is during an interview with David Horowitz some time ago, Horowitz said Obama is a communist. That's demonstrably untrue. It's silly. It's nonsense. And I'm not sure what the format gains by not simply pushing back against that and saying, well, what the hell are you talking about? Or maybe more politely, can you give some examples of socialist policy that President Obama has either proposed or enacted as president? So Dave and I spoke about that. Reasonable people can disagree about how to handle that depending on what you're trying to get out of the interview. Okay, let's start getting into this. And the point of all this is to show, first of all, for the people in our audience not familiar with this program, just to give you an idea of how these interviews with right-wing extremists go on the program, but also just to think about whether the positioning of Dave Rubin as the interviewer who just asked questions is giving us something of value.
It's exactly how we end up with reporters who are no longer reporters. They are activists with a national platform, media platform, who get on television every night and basically spew the same talking political points approved by Soros. And they all say the same thing, whether it's the Huffington Post, the New York Times, the Associated Press, Reuters, MSNBC, CNBC, ABC, the same buzzword. And it's all coordinated.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Let's see if we can categorize this a little bit. Interviewing conservatives like David Brooks or Thomas Sowell and hearing out their ideas, that's quite reasonable for an interview show like this one. I have no problem with that at all. Bringing on people like James Damore from the Google Memo or this guy named Carl Benjamin, he goes by Sargon on the internet, that's starting to get sort of fringe, but it's like, okay, if you don't want to push back about what they say, fine, it's kind of dumb, but don't push back against it. When you start bringing people on, like Stefan Molyneux and Brigitte Gabriel, first of all, as if they even have big ideas to present to us, right? They just spout this nonsense unopposed. These are extremist radicals. I have no problem with them being interviewed. I interview extremists, but it needs to be responsible platforming. And likewise, I used to have an invite to do Dave Rubin's show. I don't know if that invite is still open at this point. I don't know. If it were and I did that show, I would expect to be challenged on my views. I would not assume that I can show up and just say whatever I want with no critical analysis happening as it's taking place in real time. It's more a question of whether Dave Rubin feels okay doing an interview with someone like Brigitte Gabriel in this way. How does he rationalize handling it in this way privately? I get how you do it publicly, but I don't know how I'd live with myself privately if I did interviews in this way. It's like if I had Richard Spencer on and I said, oh, how interesting and novel and fascinating new ideas. Great. I couldn't do something like that. I couldn't live with myself. I also don't really understand why Rubin's funders, like Learn Liberty, the more libertarian-minded folks, I don't even know how they are okay with Brigitte Gabriel being allowed to come on and cite unsubstantiated, debunked anti-Semitic talking points with no challenge. Like, I don't even know how that helps their brand in their partnership, but that's not really my business. That's for them to figure out. Absolutely and completely off the rails.
So as you guys saw there, David Pakman calls out his interview style because Dave Rubin's interview style is pure garbage. And another thing about Dave Rubin is his show doesn't play a role in his show. He does not have a change of outcome on his own show. his show has always, and this is because he's a careerist who doesn't care about politics and has no passion for it. He just has a passion for seeing the bank account numbers rise. He doesn't care about politics. The thing is that Dave Rubin, his show has always been dependent upon the guest. That's why he has Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro on all the time, over and over again, is because that's who he needs. No one cares about Dave Rubin as a person. He's just an interviewer, and he sucks. He's trash. He doesn't do any follow-ups. He doesn't ask any serious questions to challenge anything. He's total, utter garbage at it. He's terrible. He's legitimately the worst. The best way to describe Dave Rubin appearances on his show is where you have a platform of like 800,000 subscribers where you can just go on a monologue, which is the worst kind of. Why would anybody think that platform is good? It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense to me at all, of course, because it doesn't make sense to anyone who has any sense in the first place. So his interview style is complete garbage. Then David Pakman asks a really interesting question, which is a question that I have, and it's a question that other people have. I know Anna Kasparian has touched on this, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. So he asked the question. He basically said, if I were to allow people on my show and give them a platform and not challenge them in any way and allow them to spew this kind of insane hunks of garbage where you're saying that George Soros is directly feeding talking points to the Washington Post, to the New York Times, to all the mainstream media. They're all colluding with George Soros. That's absolutely insane, man. That's absolutely insane. I mean, Dave Rubin has now sold out Jews to make more money. It's insane how big of a sellout this is. This guy has insane amounts of cards to play. But he basically says, I don't know how I'd be able to, live with myself privately because I am allowing someone on my program who is being unchallenged and just saying this total utter nonsense, and I refuse to challenge him. And it's obviously because all Dave Rubin cares about is the Dave Rubin brand. Okay, that's all that matters to this guy. He's a careerist. He doesn't care about politics. And when you don't care about politics and you claim you have positions, you're a fraud and you lack integrity, and I don't respect that, and nobody should respect that. Nobody who has any ounce of integrity or decency or honesty or, any level of just any, factor of being genuine would not respect that, because it is absolutely unrespectable. It's impossible to respect someone who fakes having political opinions for the purpose of making money and specifically for the purpose of building your brand. Now, there's nothing wrong with building your brand if you are maintaining your integrity and dignity. But that's not what this guy is doing. He doesn't care about politics. He's just all about the money. He's about the green. He's about building his subscriber count, building his fans. He's a failed comedian. The guy was a failed comedian who asked the Young Turks to have a show. He got his show, and it's been clear ever since he even first got his show that he doesn't give two shits about politics. He doesn't care. His show is based on that. And so he just flipped immediately once the money came. And yes, he did switch his political opinions. As Joe Rogan says, how do you change your opinion that much in 2 years? It's impossible. How do you go from saying you support Bernie Sanders, who you called a socialist falsely, by the way? You said you supported him, and now all of a sudden you're making videos, socialism isn't cool, blah, 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 blah. We need blue dog Democrats. Blue dog Democrats will resurrect the Democratic Party. My ass cheeks, that would resurrect the Democratic Party. It wouldn't, not even close. But how does Dave Rubin sleep at night? How does he sleep at night? I don't know, because I would imagine someone being extremely, extremely, just feeling really shitty because you're not being honest. You're faking it. And Anna Kasparian touched on this in her, she called into the Michael Brooks show. She was a guest on there. And she basically said that, he has this ruthlessness to him where he doesn't care about that. That is pretty insane. That's something I'll never have. I'll never be able to be that ruthless, which I guess is something, I'm missing out on. I don't know. But David Pakman, I think, finally trying to call out Dave Rubin a little bit more, which is awesome.